Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Metropolis Radio. Today we are going to be talking about Disney Star Wars' biggest problem. But before we dive any deeper into that, guys, just remember that at least one of my videos every week will not be coming to the YouTube channel. They will be exclusive to my BitChute, Odyssey, and Rumble channels. So if you're watching this on YouTube and you haven't, clicked on one of those links that are down in the description below to follow me over on one of those sites, you can go ahead and do that. But with that out of the way, guys, let's go ahead and let's get right into this. And this coming from Screenrant is Disney Star Wars' biggest problem is a focus on canon over plot. Star Wars' canon can be a great asset to world building and storytelling, but Disney Star Wars often prioritizes canon connections over plot. And guys, just a fun fact, the gameplay footage that you're actually watching, the Star Wars Battlefront 2 from 2017, is actually considered canon. This is no joke. You want to find out what happened at the Battle of Jakku, that Star Destroyer that was in the sand at the beginning of Force Awakens? Well, you got to play this game in order to find out. You want to find out who Lor Santeca is? You got to play Lego Star Wars: The Force Awakens. You want to find out how C-3PO got his red arm? You got to play Lego Star Wars: The Force Awakens. You can already start to see the problems. But anyway, let's get into this. Canon has always been a big deal for Star Wars, but Disney's approach to storytelling has taken things too far and has begun to confuse canon connectivity with actual plot. While canon should be providing a framework for continuity between stories so individual story arcs can maximize their potential in the stories being told, these stories are often instead prioritizing the canon and servicing larger universe continuity instead of the other way around. Star Wars was massively influential to cinema and escapist fantasy as a whole ever since audiences took their first step into a larger world along with Luke Skywalker, giving way to an epic saga including numerous spin-off stories examining the farthest reaches of a galaxy far, far away. Star Wars was unique among other epic stories of its type in the way it seemed nearly every character, location, and item had a story to tell, and often they did, with an expanded universe of stories, source books, merchandise, and more fleshing out every corner of the universe. After Return of the Jedi, there was no plans for additional Star Wars movies, but Star Wars storytelling exploded with the original expanded universe. George Lucas' sci-fi world grew in a way that no other franchise had before. While the original expanded universe stories aren't a part of modern canon, Disney's still continuing the same strategy of incorporating books, comics, video games, and even theme parks into official canonical events. Just before we move on to the next segment, I would like to point out that the books, comics, video games, and primarily the books, comics, and video games, when George Lucas ran Lucasfilm, were always seen as secondary, with the movies being the primary canon. And then obviously when Star Wars: The Clone Wars came around, they also incorporated that. But still, let's not get this confused here. The way that Disney's approaching books, comics, and video games where everything is connected is not the same way in how George Lucas handled it. So now let's actually get into this first section right here. The concept of canon has evolved a bit since it became more of a focus in the modern shared universe era of blockbuster movies, but speaking of a definition, I'm just going to use that. I know it's a little bit of a word salad, this word is just throwing me off tonight. Canon simply refers to a set of stories that are considered valid inclusions in a larger collection, such as the assembly of religious texts like the Bible, where religious leaders established a set of standards to determine what texts would be included in the official canon, providing a gold standard by which all other religious texts and teachings could be evaluated for theological and doctrinal consistency. Debates over historical accuracy or truth of the texts themselves aside, canon in this case wasn't the story itself, but the framework that determined which stories were included in the larger narrative. Whoops. When it comes to modern shared universe storytelling, canon serves the same function, just not in such a serious religious context for most people, at least. It denotes what stories are a part of history of It denotes what stories are a part of the history of a fictional universe, and therefore what elements from one story any other story should attempt to adhere to for the sake of consistency, such as what characters are alive, what the state of society is, and etc. With such an abundance of storytelling in Star Wars, the canon has become vast and complex. Being a fictional world, that means canon can include anything from how a fictional technology works to the eye color of a particular character, where locations are relative to one another, and any other elements that make the world richer and provide a foundation from which other stories can grow. While canon isn't meant to be the story itself, it adds a lot of flavor to the story. It can help connect character arcs from one story to another, or establish a technological, political, or social framework, so the larger collection of stories can maintain a consistent narrative just as entertaining as the individual stories that make it up. There can be a lot of leeway in canonical storytelling, such as what the exact words were used by a certain character at a particular moment, or exactly who shot first in a shadowy booth in the corner of a cantina, where 100% adherence to canon may not impact the larger story much, but inconsistencies such as ignoring the fact that a particular character was killed or what major battles were won or lost would begin to shatter the cohesion of the larger canonical narrative. George Lucas endorsed the creation of additional stories outside of the Star Wars movies, but those stories were rarely treated as absolute canon, as I brought up in the beginning. Lucas didn't even always rigidly adhere to his own movies, changing things like Vader being Luke's father or Leia being Luke's sister after establishing it differently in a previous movie. These retcons are easy to hand-wave away or even incorporate into the story, with Obi-Wan saying his story about Vader killing Anakin was quote-unquote true from a certain point of view. When it came to the prequels, Lucas made even more changes, especially to expanded universe stories, where he frequently contradicted stories written by other Star Wars writers about the Clone Wars, Mandalorians, or the Jedi. The books were always downstream from the movies, so they would accept the movies as absolute canon, while Lucas generally did whatever he wanted with the movies. Disney, however, has taken a much more rigid approach. In order to establish a clean slate, everything other than Lucas's episodic Star Wars movies and Star Wars The Clone Wars animated series was designated quote-unquote Star Wars Legends, and they began a new expanded universe of storytelling in every medium possible, this time giving everything an even canonical playing field, no matter what obscure corner of the Star Wars universe was captured in a book, comic, video game, or basically any other fragment of storytelling. It was a canonical piece of a larger tapestry. Virtually every background character has at least some sort of short biography, if not a full-on spin-off story, and references to historical events often precede the eventual story detailing the full accounting of what happened. And let's also not forget that Disney has designated all of these, Star Wars legends, but then magically brought all of these ideas back from it, like Thrawn in Star Wars Rebels being the perfect example. I thought Heir to the Empire was a Star Wars legend. Oh well, now we're gonna pick and choose what aspects of that original quote unquote canon that we're gonna follow, and then completely disregard the rest. In my opinion, purely fucking hypocritical. While this approach to canon is often enjoyable, seeing how all the puzzle pieces come together to form a larger picture, Disney's Star Wars stories have begun to lose focus on the importance of the individual pieces themselves in favor of detailing how it all comes together. This mistake is most evident in Chapter 5 of the Book of Boba Fett, titled Return of the Mandalorian. The episode drew both praise high, praise and criticism for a variety of reasons, but the fundamental problem with the episode is it's not clear where it fits in Star Wars storytelling. The story is told in an episode of the Book of Boba Fett, but its plot barely serves as anything happening in the Book of Boba Fett, instead focusing on Mando Din Djarin, furthering the plot and his character arc from The Mandalorian, establishing lore and setting up MacGuffins for Season 3 of The Mandalorian in ways that feel far more suited for the season premiere of The Mandalorian than Chapter 5 of the Book of Boba Fett. As a result, structurally speaking, it's unclear exactly how this will come into play when the next season of The Mandalorian arrives and Din has a new ship, has been excommunicated from the Children of the Watch, who declared he's no longer a Mandalorian, he has a new Beskar gift for Grogu, and more. There's nothing wrong with filling in character background or detailing a side quest for the main character of one show as a side character on a spin-off show, but the events of this episode seem so essential to the canon to the canon of The Mandalorian Season 3 that it breaks any understanding of what separates one show from another. Season 3 will now inherently be missing a major moment from Din Djarin's character arc, and his motivations will be largely driven by events that happen outside the bounds of his own show. While the story of his character is still interesting and the canonical connections means audiences can still enjoy the larger character arc in Star Wars canon, it blurs the boundaries between any given Star Wars book, show, or movie and reduces their stories to the equivalent of a Wikipedia page, merely serving to ensure characters are in the right place at the right time to serve as a story other than the one at hand. It's the storytelling equivalent to the MCU replacing all its movies' full-length post-credit scenes where everything exists merely to connect to every other thing and nothing telling its own story. Oddly, Rogue One, a Star Wars story, which should be the epitome of this problem, is actually the exception to the rule. The entire existence of Rogue One exists to explain the backstory behind a single sentence of the opening crawl to Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope. The cynical expectations would be for Rogue One to simply connect dots between stories that already exist without adding anything of major significance for fear of disrupting established stories. Instead, Rogue One establishes new characters, showed a new side of the Star Wars galaxy, provided compelling stakes, and dovetailed perfectly into the opening scene of A New Hope in a way that improves both movies. It succeeded not simply because of what it added to the larger canon, but because of what it added to the larger canon while still functioning as a thrilling Star Wars story on its own terms. Now, me personally, I feel that there are a shit fuck ton of problems with Rogue One, and one of the biggest problems is that the movie contradicts itself many, many times. Act 1 is all about finding Saw Gerrera, and then what do you have by the end of it? I'm tired of running after the Death Star, after they test the Death Star's weapon, and so he dies. So Act 1 is completely meaningless. Then you get to Act 2, and you go and find Galen Erso, and the mission for Jyn is to extract Galen Erso, but what's his nuts? Cassian Andor. I almost forgot his name. Cassian Andor is sent there to take him out, to be a sniper. But then what immediately happens? 2 Y-wing bombers just come in and bomb the shit out of the landing pad. So what the fuck was the point of sending the sniper in? And what the fuck was the point of sending Jyn Erso in to extract him if you were just gonna bomb the shit out of him to begin with? And then you get back to Rebel headquarters, and Jyn Erso promotes an idea, and one of the rebels says, "Well, why should we trust her? Her father was an Imperial." Then why did you recruit her at the beginning of the fucking movie? I love that this article here doesn't bring up the fact that Rogue One indeed has a shit ton of problems, and its problems don't have anything to do with the overall canon, but actually the canon and continuity within its own fucking movie. But anyway, I've tangented for too long on Rogue One. I'm getting back to this. Maintaining a larger shared universe canon expands the realm of the type of long-form storytelling that can exist in a universe like Star Wars, but that storytelling needs to remain rooted in the story for it to pay off. If canon comes first, it reduces the individual stories and thus the collective storytelling to the equivalent of a cinematic checklist where stories are simply vehicles for setting up other stories which themselves are servicing other stories, with the payoff only coming from the zoomed out view of events as they would be depicted in a Ken Burns documentary. All of this stuff can be attributed, all of these criticisms can very easily be attributed to the MCU, but we can't touch that sacred cow. Or can we? Hashtag shameless future self-promotion. And guys, I'm going to go ahead and end it right here. If you stuck around this long, thanks so much for doing so. And if you've been following me long enough, you know I am terrible at ending these videos, so I will just see you guys next time.